That's awesome.
Oh, yes. Go on a ride we shall. Greetings, friends. Welcome. Please have a chair. I am very awkward at doing introductions by myself, so I'm just going to bring on my guests. And here they are. It's Russell Bates
Hello.
and Matt McDowell. The
Greetings. That was
guys.
a fantastic opening. I love that.
Thank
No
you.
kidding.
My son is a musician, and he wrote the theme song for me.
All right.
And he joins me a lot on these streams, but not today because he's working. Anyway, so if you have been following the thrilling saga of my budding relationship with the movie Sheila and the Brainstem, these are the guys who made it. I tracked them down, and I want to say thank you to both of you, especially you, Matt, because you were my first point of contact. But thank you for not being off-put by my weird, zealous enthusiasm from an absolute stranger.
Not at all.
And I thought I might start by telling the story of how I came across this movie.
Finally.
Seems like a good place. So it's a little long, so settle in. I collect VHS tapes, as we know. There's a thrift store in my area, and there's a guy who works there, and usually they don't accept VHS tape donations, but if he's working, he'll accept them, and he'll call me, and he'll be like, "You got to come down here and get them right now," and I'll rush down there and buy them. And they especially don't take homemade tapes. They usually just end up in the landfill. But so he called me one day several months ago, and he was like, "I got this mound of tapes, and they're all homemade. They're like stuffed tape from TV. You got to come get them right now. Bring $20." So I went down there, and he rolled out this cart overflowing with tapes. And it was someone's entire homemade Mystery Science Theater 3000 collection, which is one of my all-time favorite shows. So I lost my mind. And I gave him $20 and I brought them home. It was 93 tapes of Mystery Science Theater 3000 and about a dozen other things. And one of those things, it was just... And yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Who's handwriting this?
So go on.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So obviously I was intrigued as a person who enjoys finding VHS treasures. So I stuck it in, and the first thing I saw was that John Waters' "No Smoking in This Theater" thing that we just watched at the beginning of this. That was the first thing on this tape. So
that's the first time I've ever seen that.
Really? So mysterious.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Who do we know that lives in Portland?
The person who these came from was from California, because a lot of the local news or the local station identifications on his tapes were California. So it's somebody who ended up here from down there.
I think I know who it was.
I have no idea.
I don't know. Anyway, keep going. Wow.
Yeah, so it had the John Waters thing, and I'm like, oh, this is already amazing. This is already worth $20. And then it started, and I'm like, oh, shit, this is a movie, like a movie. And I thought it must be some weird cult classic I've just never heard of. So I Googled it, and there wasn't much on the internet about it. It wasn't on IMDb, although it is now. I don't know if you know that. But
I just saw that the other day.
One of my viewers did.
Oh, okay.
He got caught up in my enthusiasm. But yeah, so there were a couple versions of it on YouTube, a few mentions of it here and there, but it didn't really exist. And I thought, this is exciting. This is discovering something. And it almost went to a landfill, which is a little bit symbolic of a bigger thing I'm passionate about, which is the we're kind of moving into a almost exclusively digital and streaming world. And there are so many things being lost to time because VHS tapes have, they have a shelf life, which the oldest ones now are becoming unplayable. So archiving that stuff really matters to me. Anyway, so yeah, and I found Matt. I watched you very conveniently for me did a 2-part vlog about making this movie. And I reached out to you and said, I want to talk to you on my show. What is this weird thing you made? And
that's
and
a
here we
great
are.
Story. Yeah.
And it's squarely in my favorite time period of independent film. I feel like the late 80s, early 90s was a real golden era. Before digital meant that everybody could make a movie. And I I don't mean to say that it was better when it was gate kept, but you had to really want to make it. You had to really, it was so much more work and so much more cost.
Yeah.
And I learned when I watched your vlog that it was, you were going to UCLA Film School, which explains kind of how you could do it for so little money because you had access to the equipment.
Well, let's hold up there.
Okay.
It cost $75,000 to make. So we had to raise that money, and the only thing we used from UCLA, you know what? Russ had his own camera, so we used Russ's camera. And from UCLA, we took the Nagra. Do you know what a Nagra is?
No.
It's the sound recording device that would record on quarter inch magnetic tape, and that was the industry standard.
A reel-to-reel audio recorder.
The big thing that you'd wear.
Yeah, or you'd have it on the ground usually.
Okay.
And it would operate at 24 frames per second as it had a pulse, so it would always be in sync, right? And so that was what we microphone, and we used that from UCLA, and we were only supposed to check it out for a week, but we checked it out for a month and a half. So it took 6 weeks to make the film.
I wanted to point out there's a couple of things because, like I said, I found 2 versions on YouTube. One, Matt, was your edit that you did several years ago, and I have such a bone to pick with you about that, which we'll get to.
I saw a little bit of that bone at the beginning. Yeah, I'm in trouble.
And what was I saying? Oh, and then there was another one that I don't know who that person is, but it was like the full length version. But the version I have is different from that one. And it has, I pulled a little bit of it to show you that it's got time code in some places. Like, I don't know what this version is, but it's slightly longer than the full length one that's on YouTube.
It's the finished print because it has the titles incorporated.
But it's got the weird time code that comes and goes.
Right. But so it was very late in the game. It might have been a duplicate for checking in post-production somehow, and that's why they wrote some time code on it, but it's definitely a late finished version.
I think I know what it is. It's one that we put time code on so people wouldn't just dupe it and then sell it. We would send this out to like distributors and stuff, and you would send it out. You wouldn't send out the finished project because they're like, oh, I'll just take this and dupe it and be on my way. So we'd put time code on it so that because it comes in randomly, right?
Yeah, it comes and goes.
Yeah.
But also it had the John Waters thing at the beginning.
That is a complete mystery. I've never seen that before.
As though it were for exhibition.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I've made movies. I've made feature-length short films, documentaries, narrative, and well, I've made things that have a lot of heart and are quite earnest. They're pretty crap. And like with no artistry. And this movie has such artistry and wit, and I kind of made it my mission to get it to as many people because I don't want to live in a world where you can make a movie like this and it just disappears. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's personal to me. And so that's why I'm like, I'm the self-appointed ambassador of this movie. And I think it should be a cult classic. At the very least, it could have life on a streaming service somewhere. You know what I mean?
And if I may just break in to say, don't judge your own work as harshly as you're doing, because it's very easy to judge your own work and think that it's crap. But if it's something that you have your heart in, it is worthy.
Well, I mean, it's pretty crap though. I mean, I watch something like this and I see, and you guys were younger than me at the time I was making movies. I started making movies when I was around 30, and you were younger than me. And there's just, I'm going to keep using the word, there's just an artistry to some of it that I just inherently lack in visual storytelling. So I think that's why it's so personal to me. I don't know.
I appreciate that. That's high praise. Yeah.
Much appreciated. Yeah. So
the film had basically, it had run its course, and no one no one was talking about it. No one was, and it always kind of like stuck to my head. And my daughter was in 4th grade, and they wanted to have a writer come and talk to the class about writing. And so I go, okay, I'll come in and I'll talk about writing. So I was talking about writing, and I brought the movie, and I showed the first 10 minutes or something to this 4th grade class. And as I'm introducing, I go, yeah, so this is from a movie I made. And my daughter, her eyes just go wide. And she goes, you made a movie? And I realized I hadn't even told her, because in 4th grade, you're at 9 or 10, right? And I hadn't even mentioned to my daughter that I'd made this movie. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've made the movie. And so then, we watched it that night, and, they were kind of like, what the heck who's my dad kind of thing. But as I'm watching it, I'm thinking, you know what? There's so many good things in there that I like, and it's 2 hours and 20 minutes long. And and I was just sort of rethinking, it's like, you know what? For a movie called Sheila the Brainstem, 90 minutes max. I mean, it's got to be 90 minutes max. And so I just did it as an experiment to like, what I'm going to do is I didn't mean it to kind of go any further than I was going to show it to Russ, right? I was going to say, hey, and so my constraints were, Russ, you were the one who made the digital copy. I think you made it off of video, right? Because we got it transferred to video, and it was from a video, right?
It was from a video. It was from our master video transfer of the film.
Yeah. But those master videos transfers back then were not great, right? Anyway. So I had that, and it's on digital. I've got Final Cut, and I'm like, okay, I got some time, and my constraints were, I can only make cuts. Mm-hmm. I could only make cuts. And so you'll notice that the sections that I didn't touch at all, or if I did touch them, I took them out entirely, were the sections that had music, because I couldn't cut the music because it would be just awkward. You have these weird, so the only stuff I could cut was stuff that didn't have music. And then after watching it for years and years and years, there's stuff that just like starts to bug you. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to get rid of that because it just bugs me. Or I'm going to rearrange the scene because I want to. And so then I got it down to like, 85 minutes or something like that. I'm like, okay, yeah, then I can watch this. And for me, I think a lot of the themes pop out a little bit more. There's lots of, we wanted to put everything in the kitchen sink in there, man. We wanted to have sub stories, and we wanted to have, we lost a lot of stuff, but at the same time, like for the good of the movie, I like kind of just put that in there, right? And I know you're upset about the opening sequence.
There's one sequence. I pulled some of my favorite sequences. And there was one that, here's the thing, is that this is the sequence that when I saw it, I was like, this is really special. And then I watched the director's cut, and you'd cut it. And I'm mystified. So you got to explain yourself. First, we're going to watch it. First of all, that dissolve alone is amazing.
I forgot to cut that shot. Yeah.
This is when I knew, like, that I kind of went, wow. So good. So
that's the great Peter Case, the folk-based LA musician, as the convenience store clerk.
At the very end there.
So why would you cut that amazing sequence? I have to demand that you put it back.
Well, and here's also the thing you need to remember. I cut it. I don't think I went back again. I just cut it and then moved on.
Okay.
I can see how
there is a real artistry to it, Matt. I mean, I think she's right. It does have a beauty, a real beauty to it, which was in the writing. You really laid that out in the screenplay, and it was
every shot
thematic,
was there,
and it was very thematic to establishing the mood of the piece. We just wanted to get the film moving faster. I think as the years had gone by, and we'd seen it so many times.
I think that's what it was. Yeah, because I'm looking at it now, and I'm like, and the way to do it now is to replace the music entirely, because those cuts can be faster, like boom, boom. The rhythm's a little too slow, and the reason I think that the rhythm's slow on that first part and through that first cut is we were cutting on moviolas. You know, we had a moviola in my room with the bunk beds, and and so that just by its very nature makes things go a little bit slower. And I can just, as I was just watching, it's like, oh, that needs to be cut right there, and that needs to be cut right there. And I think it was that. And there was also there's some shots like, I don't know why we didn't have a backtracking shot with Sheila as she's walking down, and a backtracking shot with because we got the forward tracking shot, and then I don't know, we haven't have the matching back. So it's stuff like that I was just frustrated with, right? So it's like,
Well, I think
Matt, I think it's worth just explaining for the folks at home what a moviola is. Just very quickly, our editing machine that we cut the film on.
Tell us what a moviola is, Grandpa.
It was called a moviola upright. It's like a giant sewing machine that you run.
It sounds like a sewing machine
physically through. It's noisy. It's hot. It is a big clattering beast of a machine. And
all the film would go into these big bins. It wouldn't go into reels. Ours would just go into a bin. Yeah.
And so you really felt like you were in an industrial process as opposed to a fine artistic process. Even at the time, there were more advanced editing machines where the whole process was calmer. The machine was calmer. You have more of a kind of cerebral approach to it. This was much more physical, much more brutal, like smelting steel. And so often we'd be spending so many hours in the process of doing this cut that getting finesse was it almost wasn't possible, because we were just the labor itself was so exhausting.
And as I'm looking at it now, I do really still like that
it's amazing, that
sequence. And then I think here's also what had happened is the movie had started, and then it had started, and then it had started, because we go from there to the wedding reception. And it's like, oh my gosh, when's this thing going to start? So I can see how, and maybe I thought about this, is keeping that section in there and then going straight to that probably would have been the better choice. Yeah.
There's this thing I remember Baz Luhrmann of all people saying, on like a director's commentary, which is also a thing we're losing to streaming services, is the director's commentary track on your DVD. But he was talking about, I think it was Moulin Rouge, some movie or another. But he said he likes to have a scene early on that he called it making a contract with the audience, where where it's just like balls out. This is what you're in for. Are you in or you're out? If you're in, stick around. If you're out, it's not too soon to maybe go get your money back. Right. So
and that's definitely that scene, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. It tells you what you're in for, and it invites you in. And if like me, I was like, oh, I am all in.
Yeah.
And I missed.
It's a very honorable thing to do.
Most of the cuts that you made, I didn't. Stuff I don't even miss.
Except for that one.
But that one, I was gobsmacked. So that
we'll
was
put it back in.
That's my
for the DVD version. We'll put it back in.
It's just too beautiful. I have some other sequences I really love if you want to look at them with me, because I want to know everything about them.
Guys ready yet? We haven't got all day.
Wait a minute, Sean. Something's wrong.
What is it?
I'm not sure where we are. I kind of remember this place. It's like I've been here before.
From your childhood, maybe?
Yeah, in my childhood and more recently, too. In my childhood and more recently.
Like it's all the same, merging and twisting?
Yeah! It's all the same, merging and twisting.
Pulsating with some inner life?
What's going on, Sean? How come everything's pulsating and looks the same?
So I hear a lot of looping in there. You guys did a lot of
Darren, the quietest talker on the planet.
All right, let's talk about Darren Harris for a second, because I totally recognized him from 16 Candles.
That's right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to...
Great guy,
point out
but a very soft-spoken voice, and George Loffman, who was our sound mixer, who did a fantastic job on the film and worked so hard for us, and just was
the days that he was there, the days that George were there were beautiful days, but sometimes George couldn't make it. So
yeah, and we also just we weren't a professional sound unit, and Darren was very quiet, and so his production tracks in that scene weren't usable. It was also quite loud in the store.
Yeah,
all the fluorescent and the humming of the
everything in that place makes noise.
Yeah, and we had no idea how to do looping properly. So it just was.
And the store was not closed. The store wasn't closed.
Oh, they were
we could shoot from midnight to 6, but the store had to be open. Oh, no. And at one point, this he's up there with a gun in the guy's face, and someone walks in, and they just look at the thing. And they go, "I hope this is a movie." Just walk.
Oh man.
The kind of thing you could never do today.
So that scene, was it written that way, or did a lot of that happen in the moment? Like, did you actually sit and visualize that ahead of time?
Yep.
It was written, but we sort of improvised the physicality in the moment, and the camera moves, and where to stage everything. But we were really true to Matt's dialogue in the screenplay. He really had that nailed down pretty well.
I loved just the weirdness of that scene. Makes me incredibly happy.
And I think in the director's cut, did you get this from the director's cut or the original?
That's the director's cut.
Yeah, I took that from your cut.
Because I think in the original.
And I also changed the timing, because sitting back, you can okay, this needs to be like this and this and this and this.
I watched them. Better. Yeah, I watched them both yesterday, and I thought, this new cut's it's zippier,
a little snappier. Yeah.
Oh, what else do I have here? Oh, okay, this one's great. Love this one.
Totally.
Go see what's wrong with Head. I'll finish up here.
Where are they? They're always right here. Billy, they're always right here. What's this crap? Tropical treat mix? Horny zombies? Fuchsia fudge follicles? Orange puff? Albert Finney's?
What's wrong with Head?
Can't find the mini donuts.
We ran out last night. I tried to cover it up.
This belongs over there, and this belongs on aisle 2.
I didn't think anyone would notice.
What kind of idiots do you take us for?
Let's kill him!
A typical example.
Oh, and then
of bliss.
followed up by this bit.
Treated like a blender or microwave oven. No regard for individuality, for intelligence, for thoughts or ideas.
I don't want to hear one word out of you, Barbie doll.
Men, pigs.
Stop them! Help!
Animal, pig.
So much to talk about.
I got a lot of questions. First of all, what sort of snack food is an Albert Finney? Is my first question.
By the way, I was shooting that handheld, following the character Head as he's freaking out about all the food, and there was the one time in the shoot I could not stop laughing, and I busted so many takes shooting that because I just could not watch him and not laugh. And Matt, actually, that's the only time really during the shoot that I saw Matt angry, because he was so fed up with me. I could not stop laughing and get through a take. I finally did it enough times that I could do it.
I don't remember being angry with you, so yeah. I just remember he had a hard time remembering all the weird, orange puffs or horny zombies, because it was supposed to be horny zombies, orange puffs. He was supposed to but he was had a heck of a time remembering them too.
Fuchsia fudge follicles.
I feel like there's no wrong answers there,
That's right.
And Albert Finney's, sometimes just words, they strike you as funny, and we just thought Albert Finney's. That's, I don't know. I mean, we knew who Albert Finney was, but it was just a name that sounded funny.
It is. It sounds like a
us.
delightful treat.
Yeah,
Just not quite sure what it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was all of these convenience store shots were all the same place.
Yeah.
Even though they're traveling around, but you use the same location every time.
Which works
for all the
thematically
interiors,
because, yeah, I mean, it worked thematically because the whole idea was that America was turning into this homogenized wasteland of convenience stores. And so why not shoot everything in the same convenience store? I mean, obviously it made it easier, but it also was thematically tied to the film.
In fact, when I was writing the screenplay, it was Sheila and the Brainstem, or the corporate homogenization of the United States. You know, like how, Dr. Strangelove, or how
Oh, yeah, how I learned to embrace convenience stores.
Yeah.
So on the subject of themes and visual motifs, here are I made some notes of the themes that kind of jumped out to me, and you can tell me if I'm right or if I'm just way off base. There is a recurring reference to people having unquenchable thirst, and they seem very obsessed with beverages, was one thing I noticed. And also that the convenience culture, somebody, I can't remember who at some point makes a speech about the illusion of choice, but like it was a good thing.
That's Taz. Yeah.
Is it Taz?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite monologues, because Russ is way down in the oil in the passenger side, and he's looking up through the steering wheel, and he's just riffing. He's like, "We're going to have the illusion of choice without actually having to face the consequences of our choices."
The script really is, and I think I can say this because I'm not the writer of the screenplay, but it really is a window into Matt as a young man, and I think it reflected both of our states of mind as young people, is that we were figuring out who we were and where we belonged in the world, and what this culture was that we were growing up in and what it was turning into. And I think Matt was really interested in the sense of, in the question of, where do people form their identity? What do they use to form their identities? And what is commercial culture doing to try to inhibit that formation or guide that formation? And is America becoming more and more the same? And we were both very influenced by Repo Man, and I think some of it came out of that as well. Just the sense that there's a very large commercial culture that is going to have influence on how you shape your worldview. And I think this was Matt's interpretation of how that was happening.
There's something also about that time, that kind of late Reagan's America time, that is part of why I love movies from this time period, because there's something tonally there that is very unique to that time period. So I get that, and the convenience culture, the recurring visual motif of 24 hours.
And again, that was when I grew up, that was not a thing. 7-Eleven meant it was open from 7 to 11.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day it's 24. So it's like when you grow up and things shut down, and things are closed on Sunday, and at 9 o'clock you can't get anything done. And then I was getting to college, and suddenly everything's open all the time. And what does that mean for us? And how do we shut down? And those things were just, I'm not sure I've had like any sort of answer about it, but it was just something that I was kind of observing and not flummoxed by, but just kind of interested in. Like, what does that mean?
That's interesting, because I get, now hearing you talk about it, I'm thinking about the inner earth, which was described as the best of America, only better, which seems to be a real place. And it's a place that I felt like you guys as storytellers didn't really know how you felt about it. Like, is it good? Right. Is it bad? Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't seem to have a clear...
a choice.
Yeah. And also you have Taz, that's his goal. He wants to get there because it represents, I'm thinking about this. It represents eternal life and immortality
and happiness.
And yeah. And again, if you never sleep, and then I also, all these things are starting to swirl around my head. I hadn't thought about for a while. But then when the guy's talking about dreaming and how, you never sleep and you never dream. And then Tracy, on the other hand, she's like, yeah, but we do need to shut down. We do need to sleep. And so you have these two different kinds of, and in fact, I do have to tell this story. Russ and I were just talking about this earlier. The movie's been done for a long time, and we're up in Chico, California, which is where I'm from up there. And we have the investor screening. So there's a small theater there. The investors are there, but other people are there as well. And the guy who played Taz, he was a kind of a semi-famous hairdresser in Chico. So he has lots of friends there. And it was a great, we got written up in the Chico State newspaper. It was a lot of fun. And we're talking to some people outside. And this is, a year and a half after we finished the film. And this woman, she goes up, she comes in, oh, you know what? I thought that Tracy should have been the girl that Taz was talking about that left him. And we're like, of course that's who it should have been. I mean, I wrote them with 2 T's in their names so that they would have a link, Tracy and Taz, so they would be both sides of the same thing. But to make that connection, I was just like, of course, what a missed opportunity.
Well, okay, so I have some questions. The inner Earth, as it's presented here, appears to be a real place. Like, people are going to a place, right? And if you get too close to it, you fry up. Like, seems to be real, or maybe it's not. I don't know. But there are both Taz and Tracy talk about their loved ones who just disappeared one day, and they're like, that must be where they went, and they must be so happy that's why they didn't come back. But it's presented in this way of like, that's just what they're telling themselves to feel better. So is the inner Earth a real place? Am I way overthinking it?
I think
you nailed it. I think it's both.
I think it serves as both a metaphor for the choices that people make with their lives, but it was also important to us that it have a physicality, that there be this dangerous place that not many people know about, which I think came out of I think we both loved film noir, and we've loved movies like Kiss Me Deadly, where there's a real element of the physically real and the physically dangerous and the shocking and scary, so that there's real physical risk as well.
So it's sort of like Taz's wife is there, or maybe she's not there.
Right.
We don't really know.
Especially if she is Tracy. I've rewritten it in my head. His wife is Tracy.
But Tracy has that hilarious boyfriend in the band.
That's Rick. A rebound guy. And he is from Red Cross, right?
Yeah, that's Robert Hecker.
Yeah.
Hold on, I got a clip of this band. I want to know who these guys are. This is longer. This is from my version. Okay, so who are these guys?
That's the Great Red Cross, legendary LA band.
Okay, so they were a real band?
Jeff and Steve. Yeah, but Jeff and Steve McDowell, who are the leaders of the band, are actually more in the background. They're the guys playing guitar on either side. And Robert, who was more of a rhythm guitarist, is playing the role of the lead singer. So they're kind of switched roles, but yeah, that's the legendary Red Cross.
Oh, I love that moment when he leaves and he gives Sheila his autograph, and he just says thank you, good night. Such an odd little side character.
Robert was he's a natural talent.
Let's see what other clips I have here that I pulled.
It was fun to see all those Amy and George Ruiz.
So here's
Conrad.
Yeah.
Here's what happened when Bruce got too close to the thing. This is him glimpsing it, right?
I'm so glad you're here. I've been waiting for you.
Waiting for me? Why?
I'm not even sleepy. I'm not
good
even
at it.
tired.
Who are you? Why aren't you tired?
Shh. You have a choice, you know. You can have everything or anything. You get to choose. Would you like to kiss me?
Yes. I'm still thirsty.
You can have everything. You can have anything. I'm so glad you came. Come back for more. Come back for more of everything.
So we've
Great
got
scene.
this we've got this idea that you can have anything and or everything, but yet you're never sated, which is interesting. And that nobody seems to care.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Dr. IPVHS. He says that sequence is really brilliant. And he would give his right arm for a diet item right now. I
had
made
those
little...
banging around. Yeah, I had those banging around in my truck my car for like months afterwards because he made up a bunch of them. So they're always like,
What does diet item taste like?
I think ginger ale. I think it tastes like because we just took regular things and wrapped them, obviously. Yeah.
It tastes of ginger ale and loneliness.
That opening sequence where the brainstem's coming down, this is pre-drone, and that's Russ in a helicopter, hanging out the side of a helicopter.
And that was your dad, who was the
So
the hitchhiker.
nothing like having the helicopter come down by your dad. And I think my dad is a couple years older than I am right now when this was made.
Oh my gosh. You know what I noticed? I'm glad you mentioned that because it triggered something. I noticed when I was rewatching it that hitchhiker is picked up by the mustache guy within the
George
tow truck, and he's towing the burned out station wagon that explodes at the end of the movie. So the whole thing is like a time loop. I just wanted to point out that I caught that.
Very good.
That essential circularity, yeah.
But I would not.
And that was
it was only on rewatch that I caught that. I would have not noticed.
And I think what happened was, correct me if I'm wrong, is Russ, but I think what happened was we had to go. What happened? I mean, the station wagon, the front end gave out on it, and so we had to. Towards the end of the shoot, we had to tow it everywhere with that thing, and we could only drive because it was undrivable. Because after we took the top off, the front end got unstable, and so. After about 4 weeks, it was, and you could see we weren't being careful with that truck, with that station wagon at all. So we went and had to shoot that, and there was something about it. We had to go out there and shoot that thing, and then it was just kind of like it was a one-off. Like, hey, what if we did this? What if we showed the burnt out car at the beginning that he's getting into, and then it kind of came to us that way. And the guy who gets into the station wagon at the end there, that's me. Standing in for my dad because my dad was long gone.
Oh, okay. Well, that's okay. So it wasn't written to be a time loop. That was like a whim later on.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
Yeah, that came
Well,
up
they
with
say
my mind.
they say
we just
you
realized.
they say you write the movie 3 times, right? Once it's a screenplay, once in production, and once or twice or 3 times in editing. Apparently
Editing.
for us, yeah.
Well, gosh, I just had a question. What was it? Oh, the brainstem. Why did you choose a brainstem as your MacGuffin? And sub question: what was that thing made out of? And who made it?
Oh, good. That's a good question, actually. The good call on the MacGuffin because we're in film school, we're studying Hitchcock, so we have to have MacGuffin. I'm writing the screenplay. My roommates are all going to UCLA Medical School, and sitting on my desk is a brainstem, a model of a brainstem sitting on my
not
desk.
an actual one. I wasn't sure where you were going with. I had these friends in medical school.
No, so
snuck out.
he's got a model of a brainstem, and it's sitting on my desk the whole time. And as you're writing, you're just playing with it and stuff because it's big, right? So you can see everything. And there you go.
It seems.
And then I can justify it by it being the lizard brain, and that's the stuff that functions. And then I can, I could make a loose connection thematically with the other stuff, but nothing.
Oh, it has a million thematic connections.
Yeah. With the soft drinks, Jolt Cola had just come out with double caffeine, and so that kind of, that was kind of like, but now there's, I mean, you look at the kinds of water that people buy. That was unheard of. But it's basically Sheila like on steroids. We couldn't even imagine how crazy that would be because back then it's you got Dr. Pepper. Exactly. But what we wanted to do, we wanted to use all the real products. We wanted to use Diet Coke. We wanted to use Dr. Pepper. We wanted to use Jolt Cola, all that stuff. And so we, as product placement, and so we could get money to start to do the film. And then they're like, who are the big stars in your thing? And we're like, Darren Harris is our big star. No, they weren't interested in that. In fact, you can't use any of that stuff at all. And you're like, oh, okay. So then we went overboard, and also we kind of riffed off of Repo Man, where everything's just generic, where it's all just generic. Okay, we'll go generic, but we'll do branded generic.
I think it's better, honestly, especially
and
because
I think it's also a good example, just to break in for a second, about how when you're in the heat of production and you're strapped for cash and time, you're relying on the talent of the people around you to pitch in with ideas and creativity. And in that case, it was my then girlfriend, now wife, Amy Seidenworm, who was very involved in the typography and graphic design and even the writing of the text on the labels themselves. It was a collaboration, I think, between Amy and our production designer, Damon Fortier, who came up with the logos, the graphic design, the layout, the printing. I mean, it was a huge undertaking just in itself. And if we had been trying to do that ourselves, it would have been absolutely impossible. And we had the blessing of some real talent helping us out with that.
So many people gave so much to this movie. It was incredible. We shot in 13 cities. Our cast is ginormous for what we have. I mean, the amount of help that we got on this thing was just, it's humbling in retrospect. At the time you're just like, kind of an arrogant 25-year-old. You're like, yeah, of course help me. And if they don't, you're like, you're a jerk. But now you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe everyone helped me so much. I mean, people took off, well, like Terry and Rick, they took off an entire month of work. Just like, yep, we're going to take this. Everyone took off work. I mean, we were working, but the actors, Terry and Rick, they both lived in Oakland. And so they came down and lived with his parents and stuff. And everyone, it's incredible to me in retrospect.
Because as you pointed out at the beginning of the show, it really was an unusual thing to make a movie then. Just the fact that you were in production, you had just the wherewithal to get things rolling meant that you had a very high level of commitment and a high level of determination and some technical skill. And so to be involved with that was way more exciting and unusual than doing production today where every neighbor is doing it.
There's something about, we all have cameras in our pockets now.
Yeah.
But there's something about the urgency of the stories people were telling in the late 80s and the early 90s that I am really drawn to. So I think that's a lot of the reason why this movie just, I'm squarely in like the niche of people that would love this movie. And I don't know how to define that niche, but I am it.
There's that anxiety that when you start that film camera and it's hundreds of dollars per minute going, that gets everybody very focused. Even if it's not their money, they know this. But if it's just like, whatever, everyone gets very focused very quickly. And you're just like, and as the directors, it's hard to like, okay, let's just do it again because of that we're right. Because you're like, okay, if we do it again, can we afford that? And if the answer is no, we'd have to. I can remember there was one scene that we're shooting it, and it's the scene's not going well. And I'm looking at the scene. Do you remember this? We're shooting this scene. I go, Russell, I think we need to cut this whole scene because it's kind of we're already said it a couple times.
In the middle of it.
In the middle. Do you remember that?
Which scene?
We cut it. I mean, it was like I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, this is just a repetition of that other scene. We don't need this at all, and we just chucked it.
Oh yeah.
Like how we shot like we shot like half of it. And forget it. We're moving on.
Yeah. There was a lot of that. I mean, it's just again, so many factors are at play, and it's all a multi-headed creature that you're fighting on multiple fronts constantly. And boy, it really teaches you to think. It teaches you to think quickly and prioritize. And as you said, knowing that as film is running through the camera, your bank account is decreasing. It focuses the mind.
And I can remember waking up every morning just going, what is going to go wrong today?
One more thing. I wanted to see
yeah.
these fellas. Who are these fellas?
Better off without him.
Is he the one that did that to your nose?
Jerome,
That's me.
Enough.
So, it's just you three that live here?
Yep, ever since Mom and Dad disappeared 2 years ago.
Disappeared?
Went out for a sunny drive, never came back.
Guess they found something better.
Acting.
Look at the way he's eating that chicken. He's an animal.
That's right.
I just wanted to share that one because it delighted me. I wanted to ask about the frat boy T-shirt and the frat boy magazine. Were those real things, or did somebody make those? Because we couldn't find anything on anything.
So this is, and this will be a good place to tell this story. Actually, what's his? I just totally blanked on his name.
Rod Gillespie.
Rod Gillespie. He's the guy who plays. I blanked on his name too. Who's the character? Sean. Yeah. He's Rod Gillespie plays Sean, and he was a friend of ours from AVS at UCLA, and he wanted to be in the movie, and
he's great.
That was his design that he drew on one T-shirt, and he would wear it around, and we just thought it was hilarious. We loved it, and so we put it in that. Here's the story about Rod. Was it just a year ago, maybe 2 years ago? Rod had a massive heart attack and died.
Oh.
Just out of the blue. So, and as part of his, as people were going through and kind of celebrating his life, some friends of his stumbled across the movie that they'd never heard about, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is Rod!" And they bought a bunch of DVDs, and it was fantastic. Nice way, little thing for him.
Oh man.
Rod was from Kansas originally, and I think had moved back there after his time at UCLA.
And then he moved to the Bay Area.
And Sheila the Brainstem.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he moved to the Bay Area. Yeah, he ended up living in the Bay Area.
Well, he was great. And I
yeah,
love
I mean, it's
T-shirt
completely unschooled actor. He did a really fine job.
But I want to look at these photos, so I haven't really looked at them. And so Russell sent these to me right before we got rolling. So you guys just go ahead and tell me what we're looking at.
Yeah, this is the first day of shooting. This is out in front of my apartment. And then the car was our production designer, Damien Fortier. It was a car that they just had like parked out in their garage or something, all banged up on that one side. And if you'll notice...
66 Plymouth Valiant.
Yeah. If you'll notice, it had no gas cap for half the production.
I thought that was on purpose.
No.
I mean, it's a great touch.
As they're going around the corners, the gas is just pouring out everywhere. And then later on, we just stuck I don't know why we thought this was a good idea. Oh, we'll just stick a rag in it.
And would you drive it around like this, or is this just for when the car wasn't moving?
No, we would. That mount. No, that mount didn't work. That was our first crack at it. And at first the idea was that I would actually ride around on the hood of the car, holding the camera steady, and it didn't work at all. And we ended up, I don't remember what our solution was for driving shots. Were we towing the car, Matt?
No, we did do that. You would just sit there and film it handheld.
On the hood of the car?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
I do remember some of those. I mean, we did come up.
We did
end up having to come up all very dangerous situations. That's George Loffman, who was our production sound recorder. Incredibly patient and dedicated man, and so calm, never fazed by a single thing that happened during production, and he would wedge himself anywhere to do his work. Great guy.
I'm not sure why I'm wedged up in there too, but there you go.
Is this the same guy who was driving the tow truck? Correct.
Yes. Yeah, Matt, I think you're just checking in on what's going on. You're just sort of assessing the situation, and that's shooting the landing of the brainstem at the beginning of the film. We had to mount the camera upside down because I had to thread the film backwards so that we could, while shooting, we started with the brainstem stuck in the ground and pulled it out so that then when the film was projected backwards, it would plunge into the ground. But because this was 1987, didn't have the ability to just run something backwards easily, so you had to actually shoot it backwards.
Wow.
I like that shot. That's one of my favorite shots.
Yeah, that's just basically scouting and setting up shots in the desert. That's the high desert north of Los Angeles, where it was constantly incredibly windy. There'd be 40 and 50 mile an hour winds just blasting us all day long. And
that day, was so windy.
And that was one of our rental trucks that we had with us almost all the time. And so we'd use it as a shooting platform. So that's us just figuring out where to shoot. That's Matt pointing out to Terry where he needs him to be for one of our dramatic shots.
Aww.
That's shooting inside club lingerie.
In the club. I love that.
Drinking a diet item. That's a great shot.
And then, and your cinematography, Russ, on that was just fantastic. It's really good.
I didn't know. I was going to ask about the division of labor. If you're like Coen Brothers, where you both did a little bit of everything, or was there one person who did more shooting and one person who did more working with actors?
Yeah,
Russ did all of the camera.
Generally shooting. Yeah, I was generally shooting, and Matt was directing. But we had a really, really, really good working relationship where we could, if the scene wasn't going the way it seemed like it should, we could talk about that and get it fixed really quickly. And if Matt didn't feel right about how I was shooting something, we could work that through really well. We never really had any kind of meltdowns or fights or anything like that. It was just, it was a great working relationship.
Yeah, it was. I was trying to think if we had ever had any sort of like disagreement where like anyone's storming off, and it was never like that. It was always like we were pretty in sync as far as what was good and what wasn't.
Well, the
we worked together
cinematography
for a long time on this. Yeah,
is really excellent.
Yeah.
There's a sequence I didn't pull it, but there's a sequence where Sheila goes into the 24-hour diner because she's walking around and everything is closed, and then she finds the 24-hour diner that just has some beautiful shots. I should have pulled it. No, I regret that I didn't, but
I can remember when we were setting those shots up.
Compositionally, so good.
And I remember we're setting up those shots, and I can remember Donna. She was our production manager. It's a huge help. She was fantastic. She went on to have quite a career. She just looked at that as we were doing that sequence. She goes, "This is just genius. This is just genius." She just loved it. Yeah.
It really was. It was like because there's no talking for a while. It's just like clinking dishes sounds, and it's just like it's like a Tom Waits song. But,
nice comparison.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
See what else we got here. Okay.
I hadn't seen this one before.
So
this is
so that's
Rob. Did you say his name was?
Rod Gillespie playing Sean, and that's Peter Case in the foreground. And Matt, we would often, when setting up shots, I'd frame something, and then Matt would come take a look and make sure it felt right. So we'd do a lot of, give and take with the camera.
Isn't there something magical about your first movie when you're young and you don't yet know all the things you can't do, and you don't know the things that you shouldn't do, and you just think that you can do anything? But because
True beginner's mind.
Because you think that though you do.
Yeah.
And then you can never do it again.
Yeah. And that's the danger is that it's so difficult to recapture beginner's mind after the first time you do that, because you're constantly doubting yourself going on your second production. Like, I felt like I just went and did everything the first time. I didn't know anything, and now I know a little more, and I'm wondering if I'm breaking the rules.
You know enough to be self-conscious about everything you're doing.
That's
how
very
you
cool.
did that.
Yeah, this was really cool.
I love the cheekiness of that series of shots, by the way, of where you just swapped out the background, and I was wondering how you did it.
And I think that was Jim.
That's amazing.
Jim Bansu is the matte painter, And I think it was his idea, Matt, wasn't it, to do a matte painting? And he said, and neither of us really knew how matte paintings worked at all. We had no idea what and he explained it to us, and we had no idea how it was going to work or if it would work, but he just sort of talked us through the process, and then he showed up with these paintings that were amazing.
Even then, that was old school. What we were doing there, people hadn't done for a long time. Glass mats were old school. And do you remember the heartbreaker about this story?
One broke.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I don't remember how it broke. It was
a big
wind,
gust
right?
of wind came and popped the thing out, and the whole thing smashed.
Oh no!
Now that meant we had to go and he had to redo it, and then we had to rent the truck again. By this time, the car was not running, so it was this was a big. And again, it's 2 hours out to Bakersfield for everyone to get the one shot. Yeah.
That is a tremendous amount of dedication to the sort of visual gimmick of the 7-Eleven. What were they called in the
Micro Minute Marts?
Micro Minute Marts. I've never actually seen this sort of thing before. I didn't know how this
you
was
won't
done.
see it again, right? Yeah.
No, there's no reason to do it anymore. But yeah, back in the, I think it was a technique. It was technique from really early cinema, and I think was probably used all the way up through the 40s and 50s.
So here's our exploding car.
And we would have
Donna
Langston, our production manager. And is she shooting that with what's she shooting that with? That looks like 35.
Yeah, she might have been shooting with the what was that called, an IMO? Yeah, the 35 millimeter IMO.
That's right.
We wanted as many people shooting as possible because we knew we could only burn the car once, and in case something went wrong with the main camera, we wanted to have some kind of coverage.
Oh, and that reminds me, you asked who designed the brainstem.
Yeah.
The guy who designed the brainstem also was responsible for this very end. It was supposed to be a big explosion, and there was gas jets that went through sprinklers and the whole thing on this. And that was, his name's Adam Jones, and he's the rhythm guitarist for Tool now.
What?
And he was, back then he wasn't the rhythm guitarist for Tool. He made that brainstem for us. And he's like, oh yeah, put a lot of KY jelly on it so it gets all gooey and stuff. Yeah.
Oh. So you guys finished this movie, and you go out and you're shopping it around for distribution, and it just didn't happen. Just didn't. Because I don't really know. I know how you do it nowadays, but I don't know how you would do it back then.
We went to there was the Angelica Film Mart in Angelica City.
Independent feature market. Yeah.
Yeah. In New York City. And you think that you're this special person who's done this amazing thing, and then you go to New York and there's like 150 dudes just like you who've spent as much or more and are just as passionate about it, and you're just like, holy crap. But that was
it was a real wake up call. That's its own bizarre sort of bottom feeding world
journey
of low budget movie distributors.
Like, hey, is there any nudity in it? No. Well, can you put some in? Because we can
you put some in?
Yeah. Nudity in it. Yeah. No.
It needs to be a cult classic. So whatever I can do to make that happen, I will do it.
Well,
I love this movie.
We appreciate your affection for the movie. It's rare.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Very great and very, very gratifying just to have someone
very gratifying
and spot the themes and appreciate the energy.
The other guy you were talking about, who sounds like he had a very similar path.
Yeah, you're at a flea market and you see a one sheet. That's like
there's a little bit
crazy.
of like an anthropology thrill of like, ooh, a thing that I'm saving it. I'm saving it from the landfill of time or whatever. Okay, well, I'm gonna let you fellas go because it's getting late, and I appreciate so much this talk. And let's keep in touch. And
do it.
Let's see what we can do with this thing.
Fantastic.
I don't really have a closer, so I'm just gonna say bye. And thank you, everybody.
Well, we appreciate the appreciation.
Yeah, well, I'll talk to you guys soon, hopefully.
This is a lot of fun.
Thanks for watching, whoever's watching.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Always chasing
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
You were able to get on it?
It was fantastic. So fun.